So you're sitting around a table, and you have trouble separating the person from the simple NPC that blends in with the rest of the gray blobs. You may have an entire backstory laid out for this character, possibly even a character sheet. But that doesn't make them an actual, breathing person. What does? Well, the answer is not all that simple. If it was, you can quantify real people just as easily, and we're not here for that. Although it might not seem like much to you at the time, adding an accent or a physical motion to your special NPCs can definitely separate them from the other riffraff you and your players have around you. It also helps make the game more engaging on both sides. We're talking about voices and acting tonight on Playing God. I'm Nick Logie, and with me, as always, is Xander Fuck-Flying Nolan.
Hey, man.
Let's try something different here right at the beginning. We're each going to take the same character idea, and one of us is going to do a voice to make it more personable, and the other will deliver it with the same shit with a flat tone. You'll see the difference. Our concept for tonight is the advisor to the king. A person the characters would speak with every now and then. Not so much that they would immediately maybe recognize them on sight, but enough interaction that they're important. So Xander, here's the premise. You are the advisor. You got a group of characters who just wandered in, and they look like the most traditional adventuring party you could possibly imagine. And you need to deliver them a message from the king.
Cool. Okay. Hello. Welcome, adventurers. The king has asked that you be hired to take care of some skeletons that are down in a necropolis. They're causing a lot of problems, and one of the celebrations for the Day of the Dead is coming soon, and the necropolis needs to be open and free of these skeletons. So if you would please go and take care of them. Here's your contract. Sign it, and we'll be on the way.
The contract is signed, and the characters go on their quest. Now, let's try that again. The door is kicked open. Alright, listen up. Here's what's going on, guys. I'm the advisor to the king. I'm really old, and I got a problem. There's this necropolis nearby. Something with the Day of the Dead really fucked that shit up. And, well, now we got a skeleton problem. What I need for you guys to do is go down there, kick their asses, and bring something back to let me know that you did it right. I'll see you then. Oh yeah, by the way, here's a contract I need you to sign. Pretty big difference, eh?
Absolutely. Every single time.
Now, maybe my Deckard Cain voice isn't the most appropriate, but certainly made it more interesting.
Yes it did. As it always does.
Now let's break down why this is.
Sure,
so,
go ahead.
Xander's, the way he presented this advisor, perfectly fine. Like, nothing wrong with that. The mission was laid out. It was very clear what was going on. You can always get things more complex or add intrigue or something along those lines, but that's not here what we're talking about. Xander's still worked because, like, it was a clear and concise problem that was laid out to the characters like you would pretty much any traditional quest, be it in a tabletop game or like a video game. Deckard Cain voice, on the other hand, despite sounding way less competent, would probably be more fun for the players. Xander, why do you think that is?
On the whole, I think that it's memorability. When a player character sits down to play Dungeons & Dragons, there's a couple of things that they expect from their GM. One of those things, tell a great story, and another of those things, which is right behind the great story, is good NPCs, people for them to interact with. If everybody's just blasé and they have the same voice and the same timbre, there doesn't feel like there's that separation and that suspension of disbelief, and the game will be lesser for it.
Or even worse, if you just deliver all of that, like that same scenario, except you're not even using an in-play voice. You're actually just saying more something along the lines of, the advisor approaches you and tells you, etc., etc. That's the
Oh
worst
God.
possible
Oh,
way you could do it,
yeah. Those are
but that
worse.
still technically works.
It does. It does. The bit of advice that I would always press forward is everybody out there has their interview voice. This is the voice that they give when they're about to sit in front of their potential employer and explain to them why they're the best fit for this job. That voice is the voice you should use for all of your descriptions and the places that they visit and all the things that create the world. Everything else should have a lighter air and a lighter note. That way, your players can differentiate between, all right, he's clearly telling me what I am seeing or hearing or feeling or, the environment around me, versus when they head into a character of some kind, there's a clear distinction. And that distinction is really important. Beyond character voices, just remember that. If you can't do voices, that's fine. You'll get there eventually. But please separate that out because
And don't think
that's
it
not
has to
fair.
be a perfect voice.
Oh no no no.
Because I will try accents that clearly I shouldn't be doing, but it's still fun. Let me bring the scenario to you, Xander, because I just thought of it. All right. So speaking of interview voice, it's a high rise, skyscraper. The CEO of this company is about to interview you for the position of vice president.
Okay.
What's your interview voice? Like you walk in, what's your internet voice? Or not internet voice, fucking interview voice.
Uh, yes. Hello, Mr. Thompson. My name is Xander. I recently applied for the position, as I'm sure you're aware. Uh, may I take a seat? Thank you. I studied abroad for the better part of 4.5 years. I have two bachelor's degrees, one in technical engineering, which I'm using to apply for this position here. Uh, are there any questions that you have for me that's not laid out on my resume? That's pretty
See,
much it.
that was good. That was great. That was great for like descriptions of things because
Yeah.
that was very clear. It was very enunciated. It was easy to keep track of.
Mhm.
Even without this Mr. Thompson playing as a part of this, like I was able to follow this, like what was going on in your story, whatever was going on in your head, without interacting with it after just setting up the scene.
Yeah.
Now imagine, if you will, the door busts open. Hey, what's up, bitches? I'm here for the interview. Can I have a seat? Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. I have one thing to say to you. Hire me. That's honestly 90% of why I wanted to do that scenario.
I
Because I
will
really wanted to do that.
I, I will say this. While that's entertaining, using a voice like that for your descriptions of a place really going to keep your kids like, all right, where
Hey,
actually are we?
hey,
Have
Bill
no idea.
Gates. I'm talking to you now. Get over here. No, I did the fucking joke version of it because the way you presented it was pretty much how I would do it, except in my own voice. Um,
Yeah,
like that's kind of universal. It's like when you're describing something, make it simple to follow, and so everybody understands the scene. Because then you've set the stage for how they interacted with the rest of the scene.
absolutely.
Um, even with that example, as stupid as it was, even without extra descriptions, we have figured out that Mr. Thompson's office has nice chairs that you could sit down in. He seems like a pretty quick to sit down, like get right into it kind of guy, and he didn't even have any lines.
Yeah, no, right. The context clues are everything. Uh, for
And
this,
we assume he has a good view of the city.
of course. He's a skyscraper. Of course he does.
He could be pointed at the fucking desert.
He's got a great view of the desert then.
Touche.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
That
the whole
painted
point the
desert.
whole point of this is that a vocal change, even minor, can grab attention from your players. It can engage them in the story. especially if you have a really crazy-ass voice that you're doing for a specific character. And speaking of that, one of the biggest reasons to use just voices in general, like change it up. Don't always speak in your normal voice. Don't always use the interview voice. Don't always use Deckard Cain like I've done today, because you won't be able to differentiate the character anymore. Like, it's easier to understand the character's mindset if you're speaking as the character and as you imagine their accents sounding. And the reason why this is good to help you keep track is because if you have multiple NPCs in the same room, you don't have to constantly switch to say like this person is talking, etc., etc. One of the examples that I wanted to use, which still includes Deckard Cain, is in Shadowrun. There were two characters. One obviously was Deckard Cain. The second one was Willie Stacks. We've mentioned him before, and he has a really gruff voice. And if you talk like this, or talk like this, you can immediately see the switch of the characters.
Yeah, you don't even have to, like... It got to the point where you could just be like, hey guys, what's up? And we just knew who it was, because that voice was so iconic. And it's just lowering your pitch, and that's it.
Yeah, or giving yourself a fake-ass English accent that sounds like, hello, I'm Solbert.
Solbert.
I'm pretty much just hello followed by fake English accent.
Giant Galapagos tortoise in a top hat with a deck.
I also wanted to throw that in as an example to show how terrible my fucking English accent was and how I'm going to do it anyway because fuck you. It's distinguishable. Xander, what voices do you use? Go.
Oh, man. Well, I use a couple of them. I've got one. Oh, my God. I think... Oh, my God.
You either have one or too many. I can't tell the difference.
I have entirely too many. That's part of the problem. Okay. Well, hello, bitches. How's it going?
This guy.
Yep. The guy that he's a wizard in a tower, and he's such a bastard, and he's a womanizer, and it's great. And the moment I use that voice, it makes all of my players just cringe. They're just like, oh god.
Because the type of voice you pick is also really good to help you figure out the character themselves. Even if you just have a voice that you start with, and you start like monologuing as this NPC or even your like actual character, then it helps you get a better mindset of where they are in like their thought process in the game, which helps you make faster decisions as a player without it feeling like you are making the decision, even though technically you are, but rather the character is making the decision.
Yeah. Having a definable character voice for, and this goes for more than just, I know you GMs are listening, but this goes for the players as well. When you sit down and you create a character and you create a voice, everyone, their very first thing to try is to try and find something to latch on to, like a classic accent or a specific syntax to use. And while by and large that's generally okay, you have to consider and think about, this is something you could potentially be using a lot. And if that's your character voice for a 2-year-long campaign, well, now you might be stuck with, so hard, do this constantly. And you're probably going to get really bored of it. So looking for something more simple might be better, and it's also okay, because something is as easy as changing your pitch.
That's what I was about to get into that. Just pitch, tone, even just a slight alteration. It'll help not only you as a role player, but it'll also help everyone else at your table in a meta sense, because if you suddenly adopt a voice to do a character, then it's real easy to tell what is now in play and what's out of play. So if you go from, I'm going to go kill that guy, to, I'm going to go kill that guy, then if you're using the first voice, it's real easy because it's like, oh, it's in play. We're gonna go shoot that guy. All right, yeah, that's great. And if you say it out of play, it's just like, are you all right?
Is there something wrong, dude? Like, what the hell's going on?
Do you
You
need
know?
a minute? Why are you so aggressively looking at the GM?
Let's go kill that guy.
Why are you
Okay.
raising that knife really slowly? That seems like a problem. GM's like,
And
we'll
it's a
take
butter
5.
knife too. So how long is this gonna take?
You gotta saw it. You gotta just saw in.
Oh
It
my
takes a
god.
little while. You have to have a cliffhanger until the next session.
Ugh. But yeah, like God. Accents and syntax are great. You don't have to do them well. And for small cameo characters, like a great example is just Salbert. He didn't really do a lot in the game. He was just kind of there.
Well,
But
yeah,
him,
part of his story was like was just a random NPC spirit that didn't have any lines of dialogue. Wasn't even supposed to have a character. And then one of the players was like, "I want to
I'm gonna
free
save him.
that water spirit," and I'm
Yeah, we're
like,
gonna save him.
"What?"
Yeah, like some of the best characters are the players making some weird, off the wall, backhanded, fucking left field decision, and now you got to come up with some shit on the fly.
Hmm. And I would not do
Which,
that Salbert voice more than a little while because that's not something I can maintain. I could do the Deckard Cain thing like all frickin' day because I play way too much Diablo. But the Salbert thing, that I had to have a break in that. The Willie Stacks thing, I had to switch to another voice for a while because it's way more gruff than I usually speak.
oh yeah. So that kind of leads me into something that I've used quite a bit. This is actually a trick that I picked up because I don't. I'm sure you guys have known. I do watch Critical Role, and I
I think it's
ascribe to
come
some of
up in the
the.
past.
Yeah, it has come up in the past, and I ascribe to some of the tricks that both Matt Mercer and some of the other players who periodically dungeon master their own games and stuff. And I'm sorry if I butcher your name, but Jeffy Tallison. He actually uses the Seven Dwarves method, which is just take a simple like thing of the Seven Dwarves. You know, Doc, Grumpy, Dopey, Sneezy, da da da. If you suddenly add, it sounds like you're about to sneeze. It's very different and it's sustainable over a long period of time. And it could be an NPC that's just sick, or they're dying currently, and they need your help to get this draft and to cure them of this disease. They're going to pay you a lot of gold pieces. And you can drop into and drop out of that kind of voice instantaneous. There's no drop time. You can keep it going for as long as you need. And even if you write down the NPC, you just write down the name of the dwarf which you gave them the name to, bam, instantly you remember what they sound like because it's just something that you can fall into. That is one of the best tricks that I've come across in my research as a GM because it's just good and it just works, you know. So even if you don't ever do voices for any of your characters as a GM or even as a player, right there, that one that will save you all. Thank you, Taliesin.
So, for those of us who don't use the Seven Dwarves method, because those of us don't remember the Seven Dwarves exist until Xander brings it up, then you did have a good point though, because I never fucking remember the Seven Dwarves. I remember Sleepy. All right, we're done. And
So that's why you write them down.
I don't want to write them down. I'm not gonna.
You can't make me.
But the little ticks you brought up are a good thing to have. You don't necessarily have to use something from the Seven Dwarfs specifically, but Jesse's classic character Shiv Scammer, he incorporated an addiction he had into the actual like voice of the character because he had the coke drip, so he was constantly like sniffling and shit like that. I know it's something small, but if you get a real good one in, then you can irritate the GM, like Ian was. you you got
Hey
sick of
guys,
that.
what's up?
It was constant. One time we just we were all of us, all the players were just sitting there going like at him, and he was like, "I will kill all of you if you
He's like,
don't
you guys
stop
suck.
right now."
You guys suck so hard right now.
But something as simple as that can do wonders for your character. And since we're assuming that most of you are probably playing in meat space, aka the real world, and not on the internets like I have to do
What
a
we
lot.
do?
Yeah, like we have to do a lot. Then you can also incorporate physical motions, physical manifestations, certain ticks and other uh, little things to really help build your character and get you into them. One of the things that I used when I was GMing a Pathfinder game, for instance, it was this. It was kind of a stupid comedy game, but it still works. This Draugr, who was running a dungeon con to any adventurers that would pass by, he always carried this longsword, which was kind of intimidating because he's already an undead. But he always held it like backhanded, so the sword blade was basically always pointing at the ground until he started talking to you. And I did this in real life, by the way, Xander. I grabbed an actual sword and held it like he did,
Oh my
and then
god.
when he talks to people, he points it at them aggressively. So I held it just like he did. I also stood like 6 feet away because I'm not that stupid. And I gestured at people like that. I was like, "Hey man, what are you doing over there? You wanna come into this dungeon? It's got good treasure." And I pointed at him, and it was a thing that everyone picked up on real quick. So even when I described him as just a regular old undead Draugr amidst like a couple dozen others of them that were not actually sentient like he was, but just a like mindless, undead thing. Yeah, even amongst them, who they looked the exact same, since he had that stupid sword motion that he'd always do, the players were like, "That's the guy we want to talk to."
Well, to be fair, that's the only guy you could talk to, but still.
Yeah, but they didn't try to talk to anybody else. And you know the players. If one Draugr talks, they all
They all
talk.
talk. Oh yeah. Wow. Well, that's pretty good actually. Well done. Uh, yeah. Physical motion and physical mannerisms. People don't realize it, but whenever you take a theater class, um, your coaching it will very clearly show you where your mannerisms sit. Now, here's something that you could do, and you can do this at home. It's really easy. Go online and grab like any number of like short 5, 6 sentence sketches. Like, doesn't even have to be something long, but clearly a character that you've either seen in film or you've seen on stage or whatever. And take that 5, 6 lines worth of dialogue, memorize it up real good. I know I'm giving you guys homework, isn't it terrible? Uh, and then record yourself doing it.
Dude, next time! No.
So yeah, do that after the episode tonight. But if you do this, you will then you'll notice something strange with yourself, and that's that you, as a person, as a human being, have physical tics. Mine are I talk with my hands a lot, and my right hand has a tendency to kind of turn over with uh, my thumb and my forefinger kind of like I'm dictating to someone, and it'll follow the beat points of my speech. And I just look down and I'm doing it right now and don't even realize it. And that's one of the things that people tend to do. So if you can separate out your personal tick as a person, because everybody's got them, even if yours is to just stand completely straight and still, someone will notice that that's your tick. Uh, But if you could separate that out and then choose a tick for your character, that motion and that movement will become ingrained into you as that character. One, it'll help you stay in character a lot easier. And two, other people subconsciously recognize your your ticks as as a person, especially if you're relatively close to them. You'll notice people talk with their hands, or they'll scuff their foot, or they'll bob around. You'll notice what their ticks are, and if it's wildly different from what they're used to, it will stand out like huge. So that's another way to take physical action for your characters and make that work for you rather than against you.
And to
It's
clarify, we're unless it's like a really important part of the character, we're saying to actually do this. So with
yes.
Xander's hand thing, like he's actually doing now, you need to actually be doing that at the table if that's the tick that you want to go
Mm-hmm.
with. If your character's somebody who taps their temple, you don't want to say they're tapping their temple. You just do it while
Just
you're
do it.
being the character. They'll
Yeah.
pick up on it. It's real easy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with online games, obviously this is not possible unless you have a webcam, and everyone has good internet that doesn't have a shitload of delay. But
Yeah.
if there is some kind of tick that's important, that you can still describe it. But if it's
Mm.
something important enough, like a limp, then yeah, there we go, a limp. Then
Yeah.
you could describe the character, limping along. And maybe if you're using tokens or some other kind of physical representation of like battlefield movement, you could legit just have that piece on the board, either like have a shaky quote unquote walk to them, or maybe like show how slow they move across the tiles, or even maybe reduce their movement speed because of something critical like this.
Yeah. Totally.
Even though the physical tics and the voices don't make the character, they can definitely help the character
Oh
and get
yes.
you into it. And also even set your own character aside from specific tropes. Like, everyone knows the Scottish dwarf.
Yeah.
Everybody. I mean,
Er,
it's a classic. It's fun. I'm not saying don't do it, but everybody knows it. So, Xander, I'm going to give you just an accent. You will not be able to figure this out, by the way. But I want to see if you
oh
can
good God.
guess the kind of character I am. There should be, if you figured it out, then you're somehow psychic. But if I start talking like this, if I start talking with a kind of a western, maybe a southern accent, then what kind of character does that bring to mind?
Well, instantaneously, I envision a about 6 foot tall, slightly slender white man with a handlebar mustache, a cowboy hat, leathers, pair of cowboy boots, and a six-shooter on his hip coming into a saloon. Instantly.
Cool. Out of everything you just described, two of those things were right. And that was the hat and the six-shooter. But the character I'm actually talking about is the one I play in Deadlands Hell on Earth, which is the post-apocalyptic version. A
Oh,
character
sweet.
named Stephen Chang, who is a Chinese transfer student who was in California when the bombs fell and destroyed the world.
Oh, good lord.
He's he does wear the cowboy hat, and he does speak in that accent, and he does carry his awesome six-shooter. But he was a college student originally, and also he's now mutated, and he is a 4 foot tall lizard man.
Well,
But
yeah.
that is the voice I gave him because he lived out he lived out west. He was there a really long time. It wasn't like a new thing that he transferred from China, but
Like when he
it
was a
was
kid kind of thing.
yeah, it was that. It's like he still grew up just like learning English as the primary language, that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
because it's Deadlands and it takes place in the West in the apocalypse with the saloons and all that, then I was like, I think he would have just naturally developed his voice, even if it would normally make no sense to hear that coming out of a character. Because you always meet somebody in real life who you see them and you're like, I think I got that. And then your instantaneous stereotyping is immediately proved wrong when
Oh my
they
god.
open their mouth and they are not even close to how you just imagined them.
Oh my god. All right. So this is completely true story. I was working at a Starbucks when I was actually oddly enough living in Savannah still. And this dude comes in, and my expectation of this guy is not what I got. And I feel bad, like internally, about how that stereotyping kind of just happens to people, and like you don't expect it because
Look, I'm not
you're
going to get into the full
it's a thing.
fucking science of this because I don't even know the full thing, but it's part of just your brain's evolutionary development to
Yeah,
instantaneously categorize something because biology is lazy.
yeah. So this black guy comes in, and he's wearing just a kind of baggy shirt, a pair of jeans, and he comes in, and I'm thinking, all right, I know what this guy's gonna sound like. He's probably American. He's uh, probably going to use have a lower voice because he was kind of a broad, real tall dude. And then he speaks to me in this kind of almost mousy English accent from England, actually accent. And I'm just like, whoa, what the fuck? And he's like, oh, what? Can it be English? And I'm like, no, I wasn't expecting it. And he didn't take offense to it. Apparently, he gets it a lot, but it's one of those things like you can't really judge the character based on their looks because that voice is going to determine a lot of things about them too. He's a nice guy though. He became one of the regulars.
Can't judge a character sheet by its stats, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
kind of like that.
was trying to do
Book
a
by its
fucking
cover,
yeah. I
sheet
was
by its
trying to do
stats.
a play on that. I also have a weird story, something akin to that. I was in a mall many years ago, and this guy he's walking by with like he's got this full suit, red tie, like I think he had like a white shirt, traditional three-piece suit.
Yeah.
He looking real fly, short but not like real short haircut. And he's walking with his wife, who's pretty short. She's maybe like a foot shorter than he is. He's kind of a tall dude. Um, when he opened his mouth, the voice that I did not expect to come out of there was, "Frick down there, That's the voice I got, and I was like, "What?" And luckily, he wasn't talking to me. But the person he was talking to, his wife then translated that gibberish into actual English, and I was like, that didn't even sound close to what he said. But he was definitely speaking English.
So when me and Bobby moved uh, to our new house, we hired some siding guys, and one of the siding guys had the Boomhauer voice. I think it was. One of the siding guys or one of the movers? Oh, it was the movers? Okay, so one of the movers like had that kind of thing. Like you could understand none of what he said. I was like, I, what? Luckily, he never actually had to speak to me at all, so I didn't have to try and figure out what the fuck he was saying.
in a more that's really fucking funny. In a game sense, I was thinking just now, when Jesse and I were planning that do this pair of characters that were like brothers in play or whatever, and what I was gonna do was full on Southern gibberish, and whatever Jesse translated that as is what my character said. So if I said something like that, and Jesse said he wants to punch you in the face, then I would nod my head and and be like, "Mm-hmm." It could have. I really wanted to do that pair of characters because that sounds like it would be a lot of fun, but we never actually got around to doing it because we quit LARPing, I think, around that time. Speaking of physical shit,
Yeah.
costumes.
Yes, costumes are great.
We're not talking about LARP specifically
Yeah.
because that's a whole different ball game for how to run that. I actually don't really know how to do any of that. other than maybe some basic shit. But yeah,
Yeah.
trying to plot out real-time events in the physical world is fucking hard. But anyway, NPCs. You can always, if you don't want to give them the ticks, like the physical stuff, if you don't want to give them a real, notable voice, you still have other options. And one of those options is get the characters something that they wear. If this is an NPC that shows up real frequently, the reason I brought this up, Xander, is because the example I had is Mr. E, aka Mr. Johnson from
Dude with the
Shadowrun.
glasses.
I didn't even have to say what it was. You know exactly what I was talking about. What style of
Yeah.
glasses did he have?
They were black sunglasses that were like round lenses, like Lennon glasses.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. You can give a character something like that, and then you could actually wear that thing in play. Like, I actually bought a cheapo pair of those glasses, which was an awesome idea, but it was also really hard to see because we were playing at night in a dark living room. So I was just like, put them on. It's like, I'm not sure what's happening anymore.
You literally looked at Jesse when Anna was talking.
Because I couldn't see. They were
See?
effective
Like,
sunglasses.
over here, dude. Just like, I'm not talking to you. It's like, oh, I thought that was Anna.
But yeah, you could wear the glasses. You could pick up the real sword and don't actually jab at people with it. That advice is terrible. Don't fucking do that. Don't use
If
dangerous
you're
implements.
really, really comfortable with your players and also have 10 foot of space, jabbing at people with a short sword is probably not the worst thing, but
It wasn't a short sword. It was a full long sword that I was jabbing at people with. And it was pointy too, so it was actually very dangerous. But
damn it, Nick.
I know I did have the 10 feet of space though, and my players
that's
are very comfortable with it because they wanted to do that after I got done with it. So it works. It works. Don't trust that it'll always work, but it worked that time.
Yeah.
No, dude, I went full ham on that.
Like fucking Big Jeffrey.
Yeah, Big Jeffrey. Big Jeffrey. He had a lot of shit going on for him. He had more of a Florida accent, I think, because
Yeah, it was like
he was from Florida.
the
So
Florida car salesman guy.
yeah, the Confederate American States, CAS, yeah, CAS and the future, the alternate Shadowrun future. Anyway, we got way the fuck off track with that, but
Oh, yeah,
I
way off
also
top.
really don't care. You brought something up earlier that I didn't even think about when we started this episode.
No.
By earlier, I mean it was before we started recording and everything. And that was your slang thing.
Yeah.
Because slang and like the specific words you use as a character can really define that character even without all the other nonsense we just listed. But since Xander, you're the expert on this part more so than I am, then why don't you give us some examples or how you would play this out when you're sitting at the table?
Okay, so when I sit down to the table, one of the first things that I do for any of the NPCs that I create is I look at several aspects to that character. First of all, the character type. Like, what kind of dude are they? You know, is he a hothead? Is he the list goes on and on. Just character description, personality type, blah blah blah. Take that to where you will. But even in that vein, if they're a hothead, that takes you only so far. Think about where they grew up. What's their education level? What kind of vocabulary do they have? What's their general culture for where they came from? How old are they? And do they use slang words and terms that may not be used by the average person? A really good example of this, I think, that a lot of people will recognize right away, but you don't recognize it, like, you don't think about it when you're watching it, is in TV shows. Like, let's say Firefly. The captain says Goram. You know that means God damn it. But it's a completely separate word that's unique unto that universe. Same thing with shui from the Batman Forever series. I used to say that all the time.
I thought you made that up. That's where you got that from?
Yeah, that's where I got that from. I used to say shui all the time, and people would, they would recognize that as a thing that I would say. It's like me saying fair enough. It's something that I just have gotten used to saying a lot and a lot.
Or hey
And
man.
or hey man. So because of that, your character can have like two, three. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, a significant amount. But if they're not particularly intelligent, don't use really big words. Uh, Try to use small words and things
Or
that
if
just
you're playing
kind of
like,
sound okay.
I just thought as maybe if you're playing like a dumber character who's trying to use the big words, you can screw them up.
Mispronounce them.
Like you're an entrepreneur. Like you're trying to say entrepreneur, but
Yeah.
like since the character can't actually say it, then you can misspeak certain words. A good way to gauge something is whether or not it's a word that you've only seen in print versus something you've heard pretty much exclusively. Because I
Yeah.
know there have been several words, even just within like the last few months, that I've read them time and time and time again over the course of my life, and then I'm hearing it out loud for the first time. I'm like, "That's how you pronounce that?"
Yeah, I've come across that quite a bit. Uh, and it's even worse with like words that you expect would sound a certain way, but they don't actually sound that way. Like hyperbole.
Yeah,
I think hyperbole,
because
not
that's how it's spelled,
hyperbole.
hyperbole.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh, it's hyperbole. You know,
And like
because
every other word in English, you don't pronounce the e at the end.
yeah,
You just
but with that word you do
yeah.
hyperbole. There you go. And it's just like, and I only figured that out because of a webcomic for some reason. Durr.
I'm talking about hyperbole and a half.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
that's
why I
what I
figured
thought.
that out.
I think that might have been the only one with the word hyperbole in its name.
Yeah. But when you assign a character a specific set of words, something that they use, like Drew the Ace from the Shadowrun game, or uh, mm,
Well, if you're using like certain terminology and stuff like that, that can also help too.
yeah,
So since you brought up Shadowrun, um, one of the character, it's another great Jesse character actually.
yeah,
He would always reference early 2000s video games in 2085.
as super retro stuff.
Yeah, that would be crazy retro for that time. And he was just like, yeah, it's just like that game. And everybody else was like, what the
What?
fuck are you talking about?
It'd be
Oh,
like
that was like that time he actually confronted, Decker Kane in play. And he was like, you sound a lot like the character from Diablo. And he's like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of such a game. And he's like, no, it's the same. You were alive when the game came out. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about, son. I don't think I sound like any video game character. It was like, it was a whole thing.
A fourth wall break within a fourth wall break.
It was confronting the accent in play.
Not the character, the accent.
Yeah, that's it.
That's fucking great. I remember that.
But like if you're playing something from the future, like set in the future, I mean, then you can make callbacks to things that are in the past, or maybe if you are a young character in like a far future, you could reference like in-play media and stuff like that. We'll keep using Shadowrun because it's rooted kind of in the real world, and if you see like if you're big into actually watching the Shadowrunners, like the TV ones, which are way different from the actual ones that you play as, then maybe your character is just like, oh yeah, that's right. In this episode, Smart Edge decided he was gonna run along the rooftop, and then actually parachute off the building and into like the fifth story window of another building. It's like everybody, all the other characters are like, "You're watching that TV show? Why? It's trash." Or maybe it's like, "I haven't heard of that. Is that new?" I mean, you've gotten role play. You can help build the universe, especially if it's an area that's lacking. Shadowrun has like Miracle Shooter. That's one of the only like video game things that ever actually references about as an in-play thing you can do. But you can make up other stuff. You could make a, if you could easily port real stuff and just like kind of change it to be more featurey. Like if you take like World of Tanks or something like that, and then like made a World of Hover Tanks, woo, and then like you play
That's
that
all
in play.
VR.
Then yeah, it's all VR. Then you've contributed to the setting. You've given your character a little bit more depth, and that was probably fun to come up with.
Oh yeah.
And but even if you do all the stuff, take all the advice, do the accents, do the syntax, do the costumes, do the whole thing, that still doesn't make up for a poorly written character. You don't use it as a crutch. You don't use any of those as just a way to limp your character along. You want to have an idea of who they are, why they are doing what they're doing, and usually at that point, the rest of the stuff comes naturally. And even if to you it might not make sense at the time, just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean it can't be fun or rational. With the real life examples we gave earlier, I mean that's just right there. Those are the two things that there are two examples that completely changed the perspective, probably the real life perspective, and even possibly where you were expecting the story to go as we told it, into something else. Your characters are you try to make them very real people, and real people don't always make logical sense. So you don't have to feel constrained to have the Scottish dwarf. You can have the Russian dwarf who, I don't know, captains a large sea vessel, perhaps.
Good morning, comrade.
Hello.
Hello.
Come on, boat. Get fucked. And drunk.
Talk shit, get hit.
Indeed. But, like the characters, even if the voice changed, the essence of the character will remain the same. But when you add the extra stuff, you'll notice that it's more fun to play that character. You'll want to bring them back as well after a certain while. You'll be like, man, we haven't seen this guy in a while. I don't really want to play him. So then you bring him in. Maybe whenever it fits the story. You bring him in, talk to the characters, and you all have a grand old time. Well, Xander, that was certainly a fun topic to talk about, and we definitely hope that helps you run your own games. Or even if you're not running the game as a GM, it gives that little extra spark to a player character. Try it out, and we'll see you next time on Playing God.
Later, man.
Later.